Fort Saskatchewan on April the 12th, 1916. And I grew up there, went to high school there, went to normal school in Saskatoon there. We always joked about that and said it was called normal school, but it took abnormal people to attend. Well, when I married in 1938, my husband and his two brothers, my husband was the middle one, and they farmed together in Saskatchewan. And the way crops were going up was decided there were 2 good livings, but not 3. And then my husband, who had been up to the Peace River country earlier, before I met him, decided that that was a good place for us to go. So we planted a crop one spring, and then we came up here in summer looking for a farm. And that was quite a long process, but we finally ended up in the Coleman Creek area, right across from the Coleman Creek School, which we thought was very foresighted of us because our children could go, just across the road and come home for lunch if they wanted, and all of that thing. So that was how we originally started. But when we got to the Athabasca, of course, in those days, it was all dirt road. And we had our real Peace River rain, which came down days and days and days. And in order to preserve what road there was, the government would put road bans on, and you had to stay there. You know, you couldn't move your vehicle until the ban was lifted. So we are on the banks of the Athabasca, and my husband went to a sale that was going on. Somebody was selling out. They had tons of quart sealers. I think that was 151 or 59 or something. And he bought those. And I thought that was a useless thing to buy, but it turned out it wasn't. We got up here. Well, actually, we had a great fishing store in there, because there wasn't a thing to do while you stood there and waited and walked around and all of that sort of thing. And so one day I went into the little store there, and Owen was busy buying fishing tackle, lures and stuff like that. So I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, they say there's fishing on down from the ferry. Oh, well, I guess we'll go too, because there isn't anything else to do. Well, I didn't have lures or anything. Owen cut a branch off a tree and tied a binder twine on it, and I had a piece of bacon on the end. So when we get to the place where we're to fish, there were also some men there fishing, side by side and whatnot. I stayed back, and finally one of them moved, and I asked him if he was going back there, and he said, no, they're not biting. So I go with my bacon bait and get up there, throw it in, had a fish and nothing flat. My kids are screaming and yelling when I get it out of the water. I got 2 fish really quickly, and I thought, that is not going to last. So I said, well, I think I'll just take my fish and my 2 girls and go back to camp. I think everybody was glad to see me go, but it came supper time, and later, and still Owen hadn't showed up. Our oldest little girl was always very concerned about him, so she said, when is Daddy coming? And I said, well, when he catches one more fish, then we'll meet it. Oh, pitch black that night. Owen pulled in, but he had 3 fish. So when we got up to the Peace River, I have never in my life seen Saskatoon berries as large as there were growing. And we filled every one of those quart jars with Saskatoon berries. And then we had to go back to Saskatchewan to help take off the crop. And of course, course, when we came back up, it was kind of winter time, and the American Army was moving stuff up. The Athabasca Ferry had already been taken out of the water, but the Army needed to use it, so they had permission from Ottawa to put it back in so that they could cross their stuff, and they were kind enough to cross us at the same time. So that's how we got up here. We farmed there until 1956, and then we decided that we would build a house in town and move in, because by that time the girls were high school age. So we did that, and I thought, well, you know, maybe now that we're in town, I could sub. So I went to see the district superintendent, and of course, all I had were Saskatchewan credentials. And so he said, you know, I would need BC. So I thought, well, there goes that idea. So I just sort of let it sit. And in the Christmas holidays that year, the principal at Grandview rang our doorbell one morning, and I was in the basement cleaning up. And my husband came to the top of the stairs and said, there's somebody that wants to see you. And I came up, and of course, I jokingly say I've never gotten back to clean up the basement since. But they offered me a job till the end of June, filling out a position at Grandview School. And between Grandview and the Dawson Elementary, I was in the school district system for 18 and a half years. And the last year that I finished, my doorbell rang one Sunday afternoon because, you know, people would say to me in the staff room at school, you know, what are you going to do when you retire? And I jokingly would say, oh, I think I'll run for the school district. Anyway, the doorbell rang in the fall, and she's still a very good friend of mine, was at the door, and she had a bouquet of dried flowers in her hand. And we know one another very well. I said to her, what do you want? She said, remember when you said you thought you'd run for the school district? And I said, yes. And she said, well, I'm here to ask you. And so when she left, my husband asked me what she wanted, and I told him, and he said, why don't you? So I did. And I ended up being chairman of the board 1 year, the last year I was there. And then one of the elected people at City Hall asked me to run for council that fall. So, of course, Owen liked that person very much. He was never too impressed with the school system. And so, anyway, that's how I got there. And I was there, Arnold Dolan was mayor when I went in, and Sid Cooper was mayor, and Bob Trail was. And you know, I think it was one of the most sort of learning, rewarding experiences I've ever had. I wouldn't change a bit of it, actually. And then when I retired from that, oh goodness, I mean, there were a lot of activities that I was connected with, like the Historical Society, and because of that, the village. And because of the village, I was into tourism. Oh yes, in the last part of my term at City Hall, Prada asked me to join them. That was the Peace River Alaska Highway Tourist Association. And I talked it over with Bob Trail and he said, go for it. So I went for it, and you know, that was another one of the tourism things involved with, you know, the health unit and the baby clinic and the preschool clinic. That was really interesting because I got to see kids that had been in my class at school. They would bring their little ones in. It was really, really nice to see that. And Rendezvous 92 came along about then. And Ellen Correa was the chairman of that committee. And I was one of her hostesses. And we all had these black and white outfits on. We looked really smart considering what was in them, but anyway, the one part that I truly remember and will always sort of cherish was that they needed photographers to cover different events that were going on, and they needed 3. Now they had one lady who was a reporter for the Block News, and of course she took a lot of pictures, and they had one lady who had put out a photography book, but they didn't have anybody for the 3rd one, and so they asked, imagine, and I had a official photographer thing that I could put around my neck. I still have that because it's a really good memory. My phone rang, and it was a lady that worked for the, what's her name, our Governor General. Anyway, she had an Adrian Clarkson Presents program, and they were doing, you know, a documentary on Ben Hettner, and they wondered if I would do like the local when he was growing up. And I said, well, you know, maybe the city could handle that better than I could. And they said, well, they told us to phone you. So I got them a package together. A most interesting person, you know, even when he was growing up, because I gather even the kids at school didn't realize he could sing the way he could. And I gather it was one of the last days of school, and you know, the kids were all in the auditorium, and you know how it is the last day of school. Everybody wants to talk, and they don't want to hear anything else that's going on. And apparently Ben had been scheduled to sing, and so he got up there and started, and I gather that in Nothing Flat there was dead silence in the auditorium, and they gave him a standing ovation. And I am so pleased he's from Dawson Creek, because in later years I wrote City Council and suggested that because he was, you know, so famous, and he always mentioned Dawson Creek when he was being interviewed, maybe we should name a street or something after him. I guess I had rather grandiose ideas because I thought they might rename, you know, 102nd Avenue, Van Hettner Avenue, because everybody sort of drives down that. That's where Mile Zero Post is and everything. Instead of that, they dedicated Van Hettner Way, which is just through the City Hall grounds. But he was very pleased about it, I guess. Well, when I was at City Hall, Arnold Dolan was just there the 1 year, and I was given the finance portfolio. And I always said I took better care of the city's money than I did of my own. But it was a great experience, and I certainly learned a lot there. I also discovered that the person who was chairman of the finance committee, got a report every month, for every council. Well, it would be more than every month, it would be 2 months. Got a report on finances, but the rest of us didn't. And I thought the rest should have that. So after that, I hope they're still getting. And I was the only woman on the council at the time, and it always seemed to me that if an organization came in, wanting financing or, wanting something, the men were simply a pushover, because, it wasn't good for the image to say, well, no, we're not doing that. So I suggested we form a committee of 3 who would do the legwork and then report back, and, with a recommendation to them, please to, give back to the community some of the things that it's given to me, because it's been a wonderful place to live. I tell you, that one of the big changes I noticed is that when we first moved to town, we didn't ever lock our door. We went any place, you just pulled the door shut behind you and away you went. I lock my door when I cut the grass in my backyard now, and I'm not really proud of having to do it that way. I think we've lost a lot of things with, and we had, such a very helpful, if you needed any help, people were there to help you. I mean, when we lived on the farm in Rolla, if one of the neighbors died, the other neighbors went together and dug the grave for the people. And of course, I know that nothing like that happens now. I've never heard of cremation then either, and I'm going to share this one with you. I decided that it's really not fair to ask my daughters to look after something when it's all over, so I took it upon myself to arrange this night. So it was Bergeron's funeral home I went to, because Bergerons had lived across the street from me for quite a few years, and they were great neighbors. So I phoned and got an appointment with Peggy, and I went in, and I told her that I had decided I would be cremated with no service. And she said, well, Rose, that'll be a little hard to arrange. And I said, oh, well, you're good at arranging, Peggy. I'm sure you'll take care of that. And and I even picked out the urn for the ashes. And of course, you can put urns in a grave that's already there. So I had bought 2 plots when my husband died, but I decided that I'd be cremated and I would just have the urn put in his grave. So I said to her, but I am entrusting something to you. And I said, when you put the urn in his grave, I want it to be up at the head. I don't want it to be down at the foot. And we are laughing like a pair of idiots about it. And Jerry rushed in and he said, we don't hear much of that around here. I have made some friends that I have been friends with from the time I moved up here. I mean, I think that's wonderful.